Welcome to the American Operator Podcast, where small businesses are the heartbeat of America. I'm Joseph Cabrera, and we dive into the stories of owners and operators who build and keep our communities thriving. Whether you're new to business or already in the trenches, we'll share the hard-earned wisdom, triumphs, and challenges with running a business in this great country. Let's get to work. All right, team. Welcome to the American Operator Podcast. I'm Joseph Cabrera, your host. So it's kind of this is a new concept. And before I introduce our really illustrious guest here today to the whole world, I want to give a little background on what this American Operator thing is all about. Here at Mainshares, the team here, we're focused day in and day out on not only helping small business owners find the next person to pass the torch to, but probably even more importantly, figuring out how operators or future owners get to the point where they can find that hunt to be successful in finding a business, but more importantly, probably getting to the point where they're running this thing in a way that they feel confident and it can send this business into the next 30, 40, 50 years in a really good way. And so what we wanted to do here on the American Operator is highlight all the things that you can't find in a book or you can't study in an MBA class. And this, my hope is that it's more entertaining than it is educational, because the stories and the grit and the randomness that happens with running these small businesses are things that I don't think are talked about often. Usually it's the Amazons and the Goldmans of the world that get a lot of the street cred for doing really innovative things, but half our country's tightness in the fabric there is based on these small businesses in America really just helping their communities out, enduring the weird stuff that comes in between. So on the American Operator, we're going to talk to really great people on the team, owners out there in the field, folks that are up and coming, and then anybody just kind of related to it. And my hope is that you just get the human feeling behind what it takes to be a part of and run these businesses. And so I couldn't think of a better way to kick off this podcast than with Mainshares founder, William Fry. How are you, man?
I'm well, but lower your expectations. It'll only get better from here.
Well, dude, I can't think. We're breaking this. So the other thing that's cool is we're breaking this in at our studio here at our new HQ here in Austin, Texas. If you ever want to go find it, can you tell folks how to, was it day one? You basically go
day one, yeah.
Bandera'd it up.
Yeah, we got some flags out front.
Yeah, tons of flags.
American flag, Texas flag, come and take it, which we'll probably touch on later, but yeah.
It's a cool spot, and for those who are not probably familiar with Austin, or if you are familiar with Austin only probably through the radio waves and stuff like that, I think you'll realize very quickly that this place has got its own energy compared to the rest of Texas. So it's nice to have just a bunch of red, white, and blue hanging out here. Right. It's just a cool place to be.
I think your friend said it was like the only come and take it flag they've seen.
They've seen
in downtown Austin. So.
That's right, man.
Yeah.
So, okay, I think probably a small history lesson is probably in order.
Sure.
Let's talk Mainshares, but go far back as you want to give context as to anybody who's tuning in right now who goes, what the heck is Mainshares?
Yeah. How
would you describe it?
I would say our mission is to back the next generation of owner-operators here in the U.S. We founded it actually out of a business brokerage that we were running called Beacon. And at Beacon, our job was to sell businesses for owners who wanted to retire. And what we found was that owners were often forced to make this kind of trade-off of, do you sell to the person who has cash, who can secure the financing for the deal, but probably isn't going to uphold your reputation the way you want, may not treat your employees the way you want them to be treated, may not even know the trade like you and your employees do. Or, on the other hand, do you sell it to the person who may, in your words, deserve it, or the number two employee who's been there for years, the operator across town? The catch-22 there is they may not have the cash to actually pay you kind of fair market value. And so you're kind of in this really unfortunate trade-off. And so what we do is we work with those really talented operators, and we help them with financing, access to investors, community, training, the whole nine yards. And the goal really is to keep these businesses locally owned. It's kind of an anti-private equity model. So, maybe a little bit controversial there. But the goal is like if you keep this ownership local, you get a bunch of great outcomes from that. You have the wealth created locally, it stays local. What does that mean? Well, it means those businesses are sponsoring the Little League. They're the ones, backing Boy Scouts. They're the ones kind of investing more into the community. You're also keeping more jobs there. All the studies on kind of transfers within an industry versus private equity, there's much more stability there. So we believe it's kind of our duty, and if we were in it just for the money, there's probably easier ways to make money, and we'll get into some war stories. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's what we're about.
Yeah, man. When you talked about the private equity thing, I know that's probably a little touchy, but I think it's probably worth. I know I like picking at that scab a little bit, and especially being in the world I grew up before in this kind of ecosystem, dealing with that group of folks, and I don't think folks are inherently bad there, but I do. What's Will Fry's 2 cents on if we don't keep business local, then from just like a little humanity functioning day to day,
right?
What happens? Like if it all just basically rolls up into some glorified spreadsheet,
right,
for a big wig in Wall Street, what happens if that happens? What doesn't happen?
I think there's like a few elements there. One is that you could see some doomsday scenario where all small businesses are owned by the same 30 private equity shops, and they're trying to do it in single family housing, and what that ultimately means is a few things. Like one, if you think about the value of small businesses to a community, so like on any of the surveys, small businesses are the number one trusted institution in the U.S. I shared one in Slack the other day. And it's above the U.S. military, it's above religious institutions, it's above hospitals, it's above educational institutions, universities and whatnot. And if you think about like the reason for that, it's kind of that last place where you see the humanity in each other. You go to the coffee shop and you can see Let's Go Brandon or Trans Lives Matter, and you get your coffee. And at the end of the day, you're like that person, regardless of what side you're on, you're like that person. They treated me well. Coffee tastes great. Maybe I met a neighbor there. I saw someone who I see every time I go get coffee there, and it kind of like brings you back home. You don't have that experience at Chick-fil-A necessarily. You don't have that experience at Target. You don't have that experience at companies that have like a very corporate sense. There's higher turnover there. It's a less soulful experience. So I think just from like the fabric of our country, when people are more divided than they've probably been since the late 60s, early 70s, I think it's really important to keep this kind of like local ownership, populist, sense amongst small businesses. So I think that's, aside from the economics. On the wealth creation side, one of the great things about our country is how many smart people from around the world it attracts. And most immigrants have that story of they came to the shores of our country and their parents started a pharmacy, their parents started a dry cleaner, their parents started a painting business. And I think that culture of kind of being able to build the future that you want to live in is very much, it's not actually driven by tech startups. Like, I guess the past 10 years, those are the ones who get the glamour.
Yeah.
Most of the time, those don't end well. And, the past 2 years have shown all the flameouts. But more than that, it's the small businesses that really create wealth and create opportunity in our country. And it's different than a lot of other countries out there. So I think it's really good from, continuing to grow our population, continuing to attract really bright people to our country, people who share, ironically, probably more values with the founding fathers than some people in the States do these days, which is another topic. And so I think from like a wealth creation and attracting talent perspective, it's good for that. And I think the third piece is that when you have local ownership, you typically have people who care more for their employees. And I think you could read that two ways. One is that because the control is there, you're able to actually provide to your employees. You're not a general manager of a private equity owned pet store or something where you can't really make exceptions if someone falls on hard times. You can't really make exceptions if they take a couple weeks off work. The policy is the policy. They violated the policy. They're out. So you just get a little bit more wiggle room there. And so I think even for people who aren't necessarily owners of small business, as an employment function, it's really important. Like today, I think they employ like at least 60 million Americans.
Yeah, that's a chunk.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot of benefits to to small business ownership, both for like society in our country, but then also to kind of the economy and the economics out there.
What do you think is a misnomer that, or maybe a misunderstanding about what people think small business is? I think you're right. You got coffee shops, you got the local pet store, but it does run the gambit, right? Like I think if you're educating somebody about what a small business is, it's kind of a bad word. We probably need to come up with a different way to describe it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the way that I think about it is it typically means that you have an owner-operator who knows all the employees working there. It's kind of like my mental model for it. But you run the gamut. I mean, everything from the most white-collar small business, so, doctor, lawyer office, whatever, all the way to like one of the businesses we dealt with in the early days, like crime scene cleanup business, and everything in between, the trades, manufacturing, distribution. So I think that there's like kind of a wide variety. In terms of what I think people misunderstand, it would probably be maybe two things. From the corporate America refugee, or kind of the white collar finance bro, for lack of a better word, who's thinking about like, small business, low multiples, passive earnings, whatever. I think they misunderstand how much shit eating there is. And how if your crew lead gets a DUI and is in the drunk tank, you're plunging the toilets. You're not going to sit and work on your financial model. From the people who aren't necessarily looking at buying a business, but are more so, in maybe corporate America or in another walk of life, and they think about small business owners, I think they maybe underestimate how sharp these guys are. And I think it's been humbling in my journey the past 4 years. Just like, these are really salt of the earth people. They may not use the biggest words, but they're pretty fucking sharp, and they understand how the world works. They understand why things need to be done a certain way. They put in their hours. They put in the kind of grunt work. And I think that sometimes you come in and you're like, things could be done so much better here, or should be done so much differently here. And then if you're a little bit more humble and you spend a little bit more time with them, you understand the way the world works and why it does. So I would say those are probably two things.
Now, you made me think about, do you think, as a quick rabbit hole, but I think it is completely related, and if it's not, well, it's our show, so we can do what we want. But I think that if you ever went back, you talked about tech startups. I remember going to South by Southwest a few years back and just thinking to myself how the tune has changed. I think I went one early, like 5 years back or so.
Sure.
Then I went one just a year ago, and it's like the whole tune has changed about like what's good to invest and stuff, and that's a whole different topic. But I wonder if you were to like go all the way back to 1978 or 1983, where some of these businesses were getting started by some of these owners. Do you think they were better entrepreneurs? Like they were just better at run. Like, do you feel like the hit rate of success, like they were better? If you had 100 business entrepreneurs that decided to start a business, that a higher ratio of them actually got to where they went past the 10-year mark than today?
Yeah, probably.
Why do you think that is? Or what's your gut say? And I'm alluding to the fact that, like, you and I had barbecue the other day with a couple guys in a dive.
Yeah.
And they just have a grit about them that's different.
Yeah. My gut would be that there are more owners today that have grit and are sharp than there were back then. I think that's just population growth, though. I think what's changed is that more people are attracted into the space for the wrong reasons. So I think that skewed the ratio.
Interesting.
I'd say, like, on average, I'm probably more of an optimist. So I would say that there are as many or more hardworking Americans with good character who care about their communities, who are driven to build businesses. And there's a variety of reasons for that. There's some that are passionate about the trade, some who need the money, some who, frankly, had no other options, right? Yeah. They got in trouble or something along the way.
Back into a corner, yeah.
Back into a corner. And I think that, by and large, is true today. I think, in addition to that, we have a culture, like this whole internet culture, kind of get rich quick thing that probably wasn't as true back then. Like, you had finance ripping in the late 80s, so everyone then wanted to go into Wall Street. And that was kind of the first, like, flash in the pan in a handful of decades. Like, I generally think the world kind of continues to operate the same way decade over decade. And, you could say the same thing was true about gold in the 1800s. But I think it kind of maybe cooled out in the 50s, 60s. You had the Cold War. You had other kind of factors at play that there was less of kind of the flash in the pan, gold rush type dynamic. But I think over the past maybe 40 years or so, there's been kind of, if it wasn't finance, it was management consulting. If it wasn't management consulting, it was the internet.com era. Then you had, crypto, and now I guess you have AI. So
yeah, no, there's a lot of that. Yeah, there's a lot to think about in that world of where that it probably more out of some duty or obligation that it almost from the beginning, if you talk to these owners, they weren't ever trying to be fancy about what they did. They ended up becoming these multimillionaires, 7, 8, 9-figure business owners.
Yeah.
I don't want to say by accident, but almost unintentionally.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, most of the kids I grew up with, grew up in Eastern North Carolina, either work for a small business or now own a small business. And the ironic thing is I then went to one of these kind of coastal elite schools, and now, the classmates I had there are trying to get back to the same place that, Dylan and Nick went to right after community college. So the world is ironic.
It
what
is.
was the Elon thing? It's like the most ironic outcome is the most probabilistic.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's let's go back to that barbecue combo the other day. You and I were hanging out. I think we were meeting these two owners in a non-hipster barbecue joint where you can still get brisket and ribs and all the fixings for like, what was it, $10?
$9 or $10.
Cheap, man. I mean, right now I feel like 2 slices in Austin is $20.
Yeah, they give you shit for it at the cash register.
And there's that's exactly right, man. So we were hanging out there, and I remember those guys that we were talking to them, and there's just like there's a bit of a hardness they have. Now, granted, they were in a particular industry. They kind of mentioned that, but a lot of the owners we talk to have this kind of non-gloaty way of talking about those things.
Yeah.
Was that at all what attracted you in the early days to kind of be coming into this space and helping out? I mean, you talk about running around and talking to automotive, type companies.
I don't know if it was specifically like the gloatiness or the rough around the edges piece. I think it was more so like going back to Nick and Dylan. I have to send this to them now that I'm outing them on the podcast. They were our next door neighbors growing up, the Sades. And so I knew that like I wanted to build something the Sades would use in some way, shape, or form, whether it was their personal lives or their professional lives. And I think like by nature of growing up in a small town in Eastern North Carolina, I was kind of used to those folks. So it was less so that I was attracted to kind of like the ruggedness necessarily than I was like, these are the people who I believe are like most emblematic of the U.S. and what we have to offer. And those are the people that it's really rewarding to build for, to serve in business. I had spent a handful of years in a different space, and one in kind of hedge funds and one in more of the political arena, and you feel just kind of disconnected from how the world turns. And the cool thing that we've jammed on before is like, I hope Joe isn't listening to this, but like, let's say this shit hits the fan tomorrow and the business goes completely belly up. We've helped so many people create wealth, retire from, 40 years of a career in the automotive industry and HVAC and electrical and whatever. And I think that those wins along the way are like so personally fulfilling. And I think that helps you continue to eat shit on a daily basis because it's kind of a crazy space.
It's Wild West for sure. When I think about the for those that are out there right now that think that when it comes to even like how a business gets passed one to the other, I think you think really sophisticated investment banking, or you think like real estate agents selling a house,
right?
And it's like the furthest from the other two. There's some like seasonings, but otherwise there's no real playbook for it.
No, there's no regulation for it, which explains some of it. But yeah, it's Wild West is a great way to put it.
What before we kind of go into some, I want to dive into just your personal experience with a lot of these operators, a lot of these owners. I know you've had just a really cool, intimate experience with a lot of them in the early days and still do. And some of the ones that you've shared with me just in our travels and stuff just kind of makes you laugh so hard. But before we go there, let's talk about kind of the operator word of American Operator.
Yeah.
And where this idea comes from with setting up, you got Mainshares, which is really like mothership.
Yep.
It does a lot of things.
Yep.
But the operator network, just from Will Fry's brain, why is that important, and what do you feel hopeful about that?
I think on like kind of the word that we throw around a lot here at Mainshares is like owner operator. And if you think about what's the harder piece and what's scarce, it's the operator. That means that you're in the business, working on the business, in the business. You're dealing with employees. You're dealing with customers. Oftentimes, you have no playbook. You may not have a great support system, and if you do, it's probably other guys winging it just as well. And it's that operator kind of class in America. Or what like Benjamin Franklin called like the tradesmen or the leather aprons. Those are the people that kind of keep the lights on around here. It's not kind of the owner class. It's not the investors. It's the people who actually run the business on a day-to-day basis. So I think from our perspective, we wanted to build a home to help forge really, really great operators. And I think today the way that we kind of help them move into the owner seat as operators is through acquiring businesses from retiring owners. But that's not where our ambition stops or, where we see the story ending. We would love in a handful of years to help them start new businesses, help them buy franchise territories, like however they want to kind of like realize their dreams and their goals. And from our vantage point, if you look at the best operators, they care least about buying a business, right? They care about being a really good manager, being really good at their trade, being a good owner, providing for their family, providing for their communities. Buying may just be a how. And so whereas there are some other options out there for folks who just want to look at buying a business, we wanted to be really intentional about building a home for people who were really passionate about being great operators and help turn them into owners. Regardless of how they see, the best journey to get there. So that's kind of like our mantra and what drives us.
Yeah. How do you feel it's going?
Really well. Really well. I mean, I love it. The people are interesting. Their characters, they all have their own ways of kind of going about life. But they share really great work ethic. They share a love for the country. They share a curiosity about how to improve as individuals, as business people, as tradesmen and women. So it's really rewarding for sure.
Do you have any on the operator front? Do you have any folks that kind of stick out to you? Just folks that you have ingrained into your brain or into your soul just because of who they are? And because I'm thinking most folks out there probably trying to get their head around like, who's this person he's talking about?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, a ton. There's one great operator down in Minneapolis who runs that crime scene business. And he is just like to a T who needs to be running that business.
Tell me about this guy.
So his story is in the 90s, he was a paramedic, and he realized that when you leave the scene of trauma, the paramedics are normally the last people who treat you with professionalism. And then whoever's left at the scene is kind of left picking up the pieces. And so he built a crime scene cleanup business. The technical term is biohazard remediation. That would come in and just help, make things right and make things closer to how they were before whatever incident happened. And my first question was like, Nate, who the hell do you hire to work in this business? This seems terrible. And he was like, no, Will, you have it backwards. I hire all my buddies who work in EMS, work as firefighters, work as policemen, who are underpaid by the government. They moonlight here, and they also send me business. I was like, oh, that's a genius.
That's a genius.
They leave in the police outfit, come back, change uniform. And then after growing that business, he realized that while they were, remediating whatever was at the scene, oftentimes they may damage the materials in the home or the apartment or whatever, because they have to use pretty corrosive chemicals. So he built a restoration company that would like restore the business to the home, and then bill insurance for it. And then he realized that sometimes people are so traumatized that they didn't want anything to do with the house, so he started a fix and flip business.
Get out of here.
So the only thing he doesn't do is commit the crime.
Commit the crime, which I think he would go, that's extremely vertically integrated business.
Right. And my wife at the time was going to business school, and I was like, you guys are missing the number one case study in synergy of all time. you NBA idiots. But he was just like the most blunt guy, really matter of fact, rough around the edges. But then once you kind of earned his respect, he'd do anything for you, and it was a joy to work with. And I think that has just kind of repeated itself with most of the owners we've worked with, where they're all characters in some shape or fashion, but they're great people, and they keep the lights on here.
Yeah, you're right, salt of the earth, but they're not gonna give you respect easily,
Yeah, you got to earn it.
You got to.
Sure. They're kind of default not trusting.
No, that's right. For a lot of different reasons,
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Very tax adverse.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very tax adverse.
Very tax adverse.
I'd
man.
rather blow it all on a Lambo than give it to the federal government. Yeah,
Oh
it's
my God.
interesting math for sure.
The amount of business owners I go talk to that are like, "Hey man, you have like 3 brand new Silverados back there?
Yeah.
You got new employees? Nope. Like, why'd you buy that? I ain't paying the government."
Yeah,
That, it's
literally.
just such a what?
Literally, it's crazy. And then if you're buying the business or selling it, you're trying to back into like, all right, so which Silverado was actually used for the business or not? And it's not so clear. But yeah.
Yeah, Wild West, man. Okay, so wait, going back to going back to Nate there, is he's still running it, or did you actually help him?
No, he's still running it. I think he'll probably run it for another year or two, and then probably try to sell it to one of his employees.
Okay, yeah. So let's talk about that for a sec, because I think that's interesting. I think when folks go like, "Who the heck's gonna buy this thing?" Like, I don't want it.
Yeah.
Right. That just sounds like a horror movie every single day of the week.
Yeah.
Employee makes a ton of sense. Why?
A few reasons. One, they know the business already. They know the processes. They know why things are the way they are. And so they're less likely to kind of upset the apple cart for an unneeded reason. Like what we see a lot of times is a more white collar buyer comes in and just starts kind of doing open heart surgery just because it looks like it shouldn't be done that way. And there's like, whoa, there's a reason it's done that way.
Yeah.
I think employees less likely to do that. The other piece is they're already in the industry. So like a big issue here is you need to earn the respect of the existing employees at the business. And if you've never operated a business before, or you've never operated in that industry before, the only way you earn the respect is by them coming to you after you close the deal and demanding a raise and you giving it to them. And I don't even know if that's called respect. I think that's more of they have you kind of on the ground with their foot on your neck. And I think employees typically already have that. They've spent time in the industry. They know what's going on. And I would say the third piece is it's just a less fraught transaction. Because they already know the business and there's already a kind of basis of trust there with the owner. The negotiations are less intense. The owner cares about them, so they don't want to ask for such a ridiculous price that the employee's kind of burdened by huge debt payments on a monthly basis after the deal closes. So I'd say those are probably the top 3 reasons they're great successors.
When you have what are the things that make it tough for someone who is an employee who's taken over, trying to get into that seat?
There's a ton of fear, and they're hardcore. But they'll tell you.
Yeah.
They're scared. You're taking on a decent amount of debt if you're kind of going the SBA route. Normally they'll have kids too and a spouse, so they're going home and convincing their spouse that they need to put a lien on the house and take out a massive personally guaranteed loan that could kind of sink the whole family's personal finances for them to become the owner of the business. So I think that's tough. I think another element is that they're forced to go through this crazy crash course on finance and deal making. Your average number 2, general manager, maybe they deal a little bit with the P&L. A lot of it is kind of managing the crews, managing the vehicles, managing invoicing. That's not necessarily the same as understanding, okay, how much should we budget to do maintenance on the vehicles? How much should we budget for bonuses this year? How are we going to deal with rising interest rates if we're in a business like, let's say, property inspections, where you're kind of exposed to the real estate market? So they have to come up to speed on that, and at the same time understand, okay, what the hell goes into buying this business? I need an attorney. Oh shit, the divorce attorney who lives across the street isn't going to be much help. I need to put together an LOI. I need to deal with this bank loan. I've never done a business loan before. So it's just like a lot to take on at once. I would say probably that's kind of like the second thing that holds them back. And then the third is access to capital, which obviously we help with. That's why I think stuff like the operator network is so important, because the best time for them to come up to speed is probably not, in the 90 days they're trying to close a deal. It's the year or two prior.
Yeah, I know, it's getting into the system, getting comfortable, and getting an idea. It's a weird. I've talked to a couple of these second in commands, I call them, or like these like lead employees that could take it over. And oddly enough, there's like 50% of them seem to have this like, oh yeah, I've always thought about that. And then the other 50% are like, never thought about that actually. Didn't even know that was possible.
Yeah.
Do you think that's because the way these small businesses kind of run, it is typically very like founder heavy, if you will?
I think that's part of it. I think like a lot of the businesses that we deal with, the owners have been owning them for much more than a decade. And so when you've owned the business for 20 or 30 years, your employees probably aren't thinking about you retiring anytime soon.
Yeah.
Like, this is your identity. A lot of them will joke that like it's part of the reason they've been married for 30 or 40 years. They work 60 hours a week. So I think that there's some amount of that. I think there's some amount of they're not necessarily being a playbook or an example of what they want to do. Like if you wanted to go start a technology startup, you have all of these kind of icons to look up to, for better or worse. If you're a number two wanting to buy out the owner, you probably don't know that many other folks who've done that. Like it happens a ton, but they're not publicized. There's no spotlight shown on them. So I don't think you have that kind of confidence that comes from looking to other people and aspiring to achieve what they've achieved. But then I think third, and I think this is like a common theme through our internal culture, is that some of them shouldn't do it. Like some of them took a job, took a W-2 job, and they did it because they don't want to care about some of the things you need to do as an owner. They don't want to have the tough conversations with other employees and let them go. They want to be able to kind of like do quality work, count on the paycheck, and then spend time with the family or focus on faith or whatever else is in their life. And I think we are like very eyes wide open, both with the owners we work with and the operators, of like, this is hard. A lot of days suck. If you don't love the suck, don't do this. Like, you're not doing us any favors. You're not doing the investors on our platform any favors. You're definitely not doing yourself or your family any favors. So I think there's some people who are employees who haven't thought about it before. They may hear something about it, but like my encouragement would be like really think long and hard about whether you want to do it. It's not, contrary to some of the charlatans out there nowadays, it's not easy. People do go bankrupt. People do struggle. And there's a lot of suck involved in, being an owner operator. So.
Yeah, no, well, then on that note, come join the operator network.
Yeah, exactly. If you love the suck.
No, but I think that's dead on, man. I mean, and a lot of these folks, a lot of folks I talk to every single day here, me and the team, we kind of like, we all talk to them. They're like, no, man, the grind's not the problem. It's where I'm grinding that's the problem. It's not like I'm a working breed. I just don't have any more patience for doing it for somebody else. Yeah. Or not being able to, had a teammate come in, and I can tell they can't afford their medical bills. Yeah. And I'd love to front them like next month's paycheck. Yeah. I can't do that because I have like 12 series of red tape to get through. Yeah. So you're right. It's not the lack of grind. And there's a lot of folks who want to do it.
Even like we were in Florida, a month ago, and like Gary's son, who moved down to Florida during COVID, runs a really big plumbing business in the DC region, started an epoxy flooring business in Florida. His number two guy that he hired down there near Naples, one day his car wouldn't start. And so he drove to pick him up and take him to the shop. And when he drove to pick him up, he's like, holy shit, like you live in essentially a ghetto and you have like a family with 2 kids. You've been a super loyal employee. Like, screw this. You're going to move to this, like, fix and flip that I bought and that I was going to rent out, and I'll give you below market rent. So it's like that sort of stuff that you can do if you're the owner of the business that maybe you can't do if you're, the number two, and definitely not if you're the number two of, some PE-backed business. So.
Yeah, no doubt, man. No, they don't even know how to categorize that on the
Right. Yeah.
Where does that?
There's no discretionary expenses.
Yeah, where does that freaking money go, man? Speaking of Gary, like, tell me. I know you shared a few stories with me on our last trip to El Paso, just about some of the characters that are out there.
Yeah.
But also just what makes our country so daggone interesting, man. Like in the middle parts of between technology and Wall Street.
Right.
Any of them favorites come to mind?
I mean, I think the common theme that I found is right now buying a business is kind of a meme. Like a bunch of people want to do it who probably shouldn't want to do it. What that means is all these people are trying to get in contact with owners, and it's hard to get in contact with owners, much less the ones that have good businesses. And at first they'll rebuff you, but if you earn their respect, they won't let go of you. So like for instance, Martin, who was another one of our clients. There's a ton of stories about him. One of the ones I'll share is after he sold his business, his wife and he were going on like cross country trips, and he knew that I used to live in New York. So one day I get like 2 missed calls from Martin. I'm like, what the hell does he like? He sold his business. He's supposed to be like retired. Answer the phone. He's like, Will. And I'm like, yeah, Martin. He's like, I need your help. I was like, all right, what do you want? He's like, I'm in downtown Manhattan driving the F-350 super cab, and where the hell do I park this thing? I was like, dude, I don't know, like Google Maps? I don't know, like try Port Authority?
You're the only one in town with one of these right now.
Yeah, seriously. And so you're just kind of like, once you become friends with them is what really happened once you work with them and you gain their trust. And Gary's definitely one of those people as well where, chat with him a good bit. Saw him down when we went down to Florida, which is great. And now his son, he's now advising operators to the operator network. His son is thinking about transitioning his business to be owned by an operator, probably through our network, which is really cool to see. It's kind of full circle.
Yeah, man.
So it's just nice to kind of hear their stories and stay in touch with them over the years, and they keep texting you and whatnot. So, I mean, the internal Mainshares stories go on, but I'm trying to think, of the ones we can share. One was of one of our colleagues. His high school son went down to Port A, which is the beach down in Texas, and got in a little bit of trouble with the cops. He was underage. And sure enough, our teammate didn't call a personal friend down there. They called a client and said, do you know who the hell can bail my stepson out of jail? And, they delivered. So, they stick by you once you kind of break through that steely ice.
It's total ride or die mentality, which I think is it takes a bit to get there, but what makes this job so fun, and what makes it so hard for folks that I probably get every third conversation, every second conversation. I'm sure you do too, Will, where they go, how do you even get a hold of these owners?
Yeah.
And when I get a hold of them, like I can't keep them on the line for more than a minute or two.
Yeah.
And you recognize that it's got to be like they don't see anything you're talking about as like as a sales thing or an opportunity to whatever it might be. I was actually thinking about it the other day too. If you meet most of these business owners, most of them that have been around for a long period of time, in a weird way, they're almost not even trying to get the highest dollar or any dollar for their business sometimes. Because like they've been pretty good savers. They figured out how to like deal with their cash. In a lot of ways, they've kind of just had it set. So it's really got to be the right dude or dudette that comes through the door that makes them go like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think also like they want a fair price. If they're selling to like a great operator, they just want a fair price.
Yeah.
If they're selling to private equity, they're like, fuck you. Like
jack that up. Everything you can.
I mean, we had this one guy who had a big commercial cleaning business. They did a bunch of contracts in Vegas, SeaWorld. And I remember he sold to this private equity shop. Hopefully I'll stay vague enough. And they didn't treat him very well after the sale. But as soon as the sale closed, he went and just bought a Rolls. I was like, all right, dude, whatever the fuck you want to do. That's what you want to do. And the funniest part to me of the whole transaction was these guys were trying to do a QOE, like a quality of earnings, where you try to verify, how legit are the earnings. And they got on the phone with his accountant, and I was on the line at the time as well. And it was this Jewish accountant out of Vegas. The guy must have been like 70 years old, and his name was Sandy. And they're like, so like, how do you allocate the operational expenses and like, no, the COGS are legit, blah, blah, blah. He's like, well, he comes in every year with 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, writes down his OpEx. I enter him in the tax returns, and we call it a day. Okay. And these guys are like, wait, this business is worth $12 million, and that's how you file your taxes? And sure enough, it was. And then the question is like, are you going to buy the business or not? And they ultimately did, and they made a great return. They didn't treat the owner too well during the earnout period, but that's the private equity story.
That's kind of why we want to keep these things local if you can, man.
For sure.
When you think about, I want to hop back a little bit into kind of small business America, but before we go there, like speaking of, we've kind of mentioned it a few times on the money side of things.
Yeah.
You kind of think about it from the context of a mortgage or something. Folks go, yeah, I'm probably going to have some, if I ever wanted to do this, I probably have to have some money down to be able to go do this. And quite frankly, I don't know, like if that business is worth $5 million, I'm never going to be able to save $1 million for that to happen. What's some of the things that you can kind of break people's minds on, like, hey, like, have you ever thought about considering this and being an owner-operator? Here's some things here's some new things to take with you, nuggets-wise.
Yeah, well, we've helped people buy businesses of $15K to their name. So I don't think that money should be the issue. I think there are a lot of investors out there who believe in small businesses as an asset class, who see the opportunity to invest in them, are excited, and who are patriots. I think they are willing to back hardworking folks and bet on them. So I don't think that the absolute dollars should be the barrier. You need to have some money because you need to essentially tee up the deal to happen. Meaning, like, if you need an attorney, you got to pay the attorney's retainer. You got to pay the loan application fee. You can't be raising money for that piece. If you are, the investor's take will be like, hey, if you don't have $15K to put behind this thing, are you great at managing your money? Should I trust you with corporate finances? Which may be right or wrong, but that's definitely how they look at it. So I would say, like, you can go and get a $5 million SBA loan with no personal net worth behind it if you have good FICO. You need other pieces, right? You probably either need a seller of a business who's willing to sell or finance a good piece and put it on standby during the life of the loan. I know these are technical terms, but luckily JC's operator network will explain them all. So you need kind of the seller to play ball with you, or you need investors to play ball with you, or ideally, in our view, kind of both is probably the right mix. But money isn't the barrier. I think the barrier is someone who understands what they're getting themselves into, who's high character, who is committed to like compounding themselves as an individual. We look for folks who have read 5 books in the past 6 months related to what they're interested in. Like, that's a great proxy for someone who invests in themselves, because time is the scarcest commodity. So I would say from that perspective, there's a lot of different financing resources out there for great operators.
Yeah, that's something that they don't talk. Heck, I don't remember a single class on like grit and character, and it's funny how much we talk about that here in this office. I was up at Waco with Chris, one of our advisors. We're going through the whole shtick about things he can advise on, kind of his master class, kind of, so to speak. Yeah. And I remember we grabbed a bite to eat afterwards, and he goes, "Dude, look, man, like, make sure they got a baseline business acumen, but at the end of the day, like, whatever it takes, figure out how you determine grit and character."
Yeah.
What, in his exact words were, make them tell you something really freaking hard they've done, like really hard. Yeah. And he goes, and then I'll talk to them. Yeah. And he goes, if I believe that it actually was tough and they actually had to like scoop out of that thing.
Sure.
Why do you think that's just such a common drumbeat? And we say it, and I think people listening in right now might go like, okay, yeah, cool, nice to have. And they go right back to the numbers. Yeah. When, if anything, you just finished saying numbers don't really matter that much. It's all this other stuff.
Yeah. I think like the cliches saying is like change is the only constant. I think in small business, it's like shit show is the only constant. Things just always go wrong. Like, they're always going to go wrong. And
you can't hide.
You can't hide. And you want someone who is capable of just pushing through. And you want someone who doesn't get like demoralized by it. They're just kind of like, all right, this is what I signed up for. Let's go. So I think that's one piece. I think the other piece also that's not necessarily grit, but more on the character piece is, frankly, in small businesses, a lot of opportunity to do things the wrong way. You're a small enough business that the regulators, the power that be, they're not necessarily looking at your business, whether that means auditing your taxes, or if you're in an industry, you know, that the state agency looking into whether you're doing things to code, whatever it is. And you want people who are going to do it the right way. And you want people who, when no one else is watching, they're doing the right thing, because frankly, you are putting a decent amount of trust in them. If they wanted to defraud their customers, their investors, blah, 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 there's going to be opportunities to do that. And you want people who have a good moral code, who think long term. You know, that's not in their DNA. So I think that's another piece. And I would say the last is that more than it, like, let's fast forward 15, 20 years and say that AI takes over the world. Most of these trades businesses are still going to be there.
Yeah.
And they're going to be there because they require humans, and it's a people business. And when it's a people business, your character matters a lot more, and how you interact with people and how you present yourself and how you're empathetic. Like Patrick, another advisor in the network, went so far as to set up a school not to teach people how to be HVAC techs, but to teach them how to deal with customers. And like, that's like so on the money.
Yeah.
And so I'd say from even just like being a good business owner, let's say that you're ethical and you have hard work ethic and whatnot and grit, you still got to be able to, you know, delight your customers and, you know, make them want to come back for more.
Yeah, it's such an odd thing for us to not prioritize in our day to day, but then you think about if we can all like personalize it and go, my wife had to wait at the house this morning for someone to show up.
Yeah.
And if she's smiling when I get back home because she had a really pleasant experience with like a really professional individual who tried to respect and whatever.
Yeah.
Dude, we're not hiring anybody else.
Totally.
That person comes every time now.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it's those things that we spend a lot of time on like new customer growth, these business owners. Like I think a lot of the MBAs come down and go like growth strategies, and they almost forget like, what about retention strategies? Right. That's super, especially with these businesses that are just humming cash.
Yeah. Or the ones who, you know, focus on growth. It's all marketing and fancy CRMs and automations. It's like, no, dude, the business hasn't called, it hasn't done cold calling ever. Maybe start by getting, you know, a nice young college grad to call around and see if they could get some more customers. That's probably number one, not, you know, installing your, you know, fancy software. So
I'll give you a scrappy one that one of our advisors, it was actually Patrick. So Patrick, if you're listening in, man, I'm giving one of your secrets away here. But he was like, look, man, you know how I grow my business? I go, how? He goes, he looks at, anytime he's about to make a new acquisition, he looks at voicemails unanswered. Like that's a metric he looks at. And you go, like, I bet you no private equity KPI anywhere, any out there is looking at voicemails unanswered. And he goes, it's easy. You just look at call logs and you just like literally, he goes, even if you got to manumate it, you look at a small shop and you go, okay, on average, 15 calls a day unanswered. Yeah. And so he literally adds a metric to that. And he goes, my growth strategy next year is literally just answer all those calls. Yeah. And it's just it's that kind of stuff that makes someone successful in this game versus someone who's just thinking about like, if they use the words AI or paid marketing or Google ads, it's just a little bit like, good luck, man.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think there are a bunch of those type of like hidden secrets that from the outside looking in, people don't pick up on. Like one of the ones that we found specifically in the trades is that the best companies, the owners invest in really nice trucks for their crews.
Oh, interesting.
And they're like, look, these guys are spending 8, 9, 10 hours a day in them. Oftentimes they're taking them home. They're not leaving them on the company lot. Like make them proud. And if you make them proud, they're going to do great work. And I think that's like entirely true. That, you know, I've yet to see I'm sure it won't exist, but I've yet to see a shitty business who hasn't invested well in, you know, in their equipment.
And you found most of them are letting them use it for personal stuff too if they need to?
They probably have to pay for their own gas if they're using it. I don't think necessarily that they're using it a ton for personal, but I think it's more so like you want to feel proud of the business that you work for. And if I give you, you know, a new upgraded truck every 3 or 4 years and it's not scratched, it's not dented, it's not like old tech inside the car, you're going to be more satisfied. Like at Google, they let you do a scooter around the office and get, you know, free matcha or whatever. But for these businesses, it's like, let's get a really nice truck that this guy's going to spend, you know, hundreds or thousands of hours in a year. make him feel comfortable, make him feel proud, give him the latest kind of gizmo, and he's going to go do great work. And he's going to be, in a good mood when he gets in the morning. I think that's really true. And I think the other thing that we've also noticed is probably more recent is we've been hanging out with a bunch of owners in person all across the states. The companies that have swag. We were down in a different trip to Florida. It's a really cool electrical company, and they had these like neon green, like really cool designed polos, like golf shirts that they all wore. And then every couple weeks they would go out for fishing trips that the owner said was mainly boozing trips, but they allegedly did some fishing. I think it's just that type of like culture that also gets back to why keeping them locally owned and operated is so important. Like you're not going to get that in these businesses that are kind of owned by big conglomerates and whatnot. There's just not that level of it caring about the other people on the team.
Yeah, no, it's and if you haven't experienced it, that's a good thought here. Like if you haven't experienced that feeling, because for some folks probably tuning in right now, they're going like, yeah, I don't know if I want that or not. The funny thing is I guarantee you want that. I feel that way here all the time with the team. What any advice you'd give to somebody that goes like, look, if you don't know what I'm talking about, do this before becoming even an owner and see if you can get some exposure to like the way that feels. Because it's like family meets locker room meets something. It's something special going on that you're describing.
I mean, I think the easiest one is when you go drop your car off to get worked on, just stay in the shop for an extra 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And just see how those guys talk shit to each other and care about each other, ask about their family lives, but still talk shit to each other.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most accessible way to kind of see how these businesses operate under the hood.
Yeah, man.
And it's just like cool to see they care about each other,
Yeah, it's there's some you can tell there's like a blood bond.
Yeah.
That happens.
Yeah.
And I think the right new owner coming in can like be a really cool like older brother, older sister figure.
Yeah.
To these folks. And I don't know that we always value how good that can feel.
Totally. And like one of the strategies I've seen for new owners of a business is to send around a survey after the deal closes of like, what are the 3 things that you wish were different about the company? Oftentimes they had respect for the old owner, but they were probably a little stubborn. And there's some really simple things that could make their lives better. So like one of the examples of a buyer that we worked with, sent around a similar survey, got answers back from the employees that it was all about when they sent the schedules out for the next day. So previously the old owner would, get back from working around 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, have dinner, watch an hour of TV with his wife, and then do all like the route planning of like who's going where tomorrow. And so what that meant for the employees is like oftentimes it was sent out at probably like 11 o'clock, midnight. They would already be asleep. They'd open it first thing in the morning and they'd be like, shit, I need to like change my childcare because I got to leave 30 minutes early or something like that. And all they wanted was like, hey man, when you get home, can you please just spend 30 minutes and do this before you eat dinner? And he did it and they were thrilled. There was another thing that the owner did in that transaction that originally the buyer was going to change and realize that was on purpose, which was that every 2 weeks he would have everyone come over to his house to get their pay stubs, to get their checks. And at first he's like, why the hell are they doing this? Like, just put this on like an internet platform where we can manage payroll automatically. Like, this is super silly. What it turned out would happen is everyone would show up at the same time, have 2 or 3 beers together. And it was kind of their way of like blowing off some steam and hanging out every 2 weeks. And so some of those rituals that like from the outside looking in, it's like, oh, this is kind of the old school non-tech way to do it. It's like, well, maybe there's another reason that they do it that way.
Yeah, there's something you can't. I think that's something you don't find in a corporate setting very much. Have you ever thought about that? Like when you leave, let's just use Apple. If you're ever working at Apple and then you leave, you have zero relationship with that individual. This is why I think actually former military makes really good operator candidates as well. Yeah. Because they're used to being like, my friend group is also my work group. Right. And my families and my wives and husbands, everybody hangs out together. All the kids go to school together and everything else. And that's like how these businesses are.
Totally.
Everybody just knows each other. What are you doing Saturday?
Yeah.
Technically coming back to work because we're going to a barbecue.
Yep.
Yeah.
Totally. I think it's uncommon to find in kind of typical corporate America. I think there's some companies out there who pull it off, but most of them don't.
Yeah. I know we're rounding bases here, so and that daggone hour almost went by fast, man. It always does. Just the optimist in you looking at small business in America.
Yeah.
You know, where there's a lot of talk of a lot of other things, and we kind of covered this at the beginning, but what makes you hopeful just about what the future holds? Even though I know we're all trying to do our best to get more operators in to be encouraged to become future owners, whether it's the talent or whether it's just where economically things are headed or whatever, like what are the things that keep you hopeful?
I mean, I think the like general spirit of Americans is still there. And like my kind of like personal MO is either like fight for the future you want or shut up, you know? So like, I think I'm by and large, my take is there are just as many hardworking, high quality Americans out there today as there have been in the past. There are probably more. There are also some absolute crazies out there. And you can either do nothing and complain about them, and let them kind of soak up the airways and kind of whip the country into the version of the world that they want it to be, or you can go out there and fight for the future you want. And so like for me, I think small businesses is like the best way to do that. I think that, you know, your average small business owner is a realist. They're a character. They care about the people around them. And, you know, creating more small business owners and more success stories in kind of middle America is how we kind of keep this company, or this country rather,
Both.
both going in the right direction. So like that would be my take. I think like you could make some interesting arguments that like probably the last shoe to drop if these AI overlords take over is, you know, small service businesses. So it's kind of like there's a world in which the engineer gets automated before the plumber does. And I think that'd be pretty ironic and pretty hilarious. But I mean, some people think that kind of the days of these businesses are coming to an end. And I think like they will never come to an end until the spirit comes to an end, which sounds kind of like, you know, fluffy and silly to say. But a lot of the reason these businesses were started is that someone had a work ethic and a streak of independence and a streak of like, I'm going to do things my way. So they started a business, and that's how they expressed it. And I think as long as we nurture that kind of fire, small businesses will be thriving, and there'll be more and more each year. And it dates like all the way back to the country's founding. Most of the signers to both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were small business owners or sons and daughters, actually no daughters, sons of small business owners. So I think that streak, I think we will keep alive. And the funny thing is that the more immigrants that come here, the more it helps our case, because they're typically, you know, starting small businesses as soon as they get here.
Yeah, I'm really daggone good at it, man.
Yeah, they grind.
They grind. It's a humility too, right? Like that's the thing that's hard to teach. I think it's just like not being, not title chasing.
Yeah, not title chasing. And like, I think that a lot of Americans are that way too. I just think that kind of the internet and media and whatnot is taken up by people who are a bit crazy and, you know, have lost touch with reality. But like when I go back home, most of my friends are, as I said, kind of involved in small businesses, and they're all very reasonable human beings. And Greenville, North Carolina isn't the coolest city on planet Earth, and there are a lot of cities that look exactly like it. So,
before we leave, Van, what if anybody listening in right now, tuning in, and I'm hoping it's everybody. I mean, just people who want to like nerd out about what's going on in the world. But for somebody going like, man, okay, I never thought about owning a business. Like who do you think is probably the right candidate out there for business ownership in the newer generation, so to speak? Millennial X, or not Millennial X, X, Millennial Z.
Yeah.
That ought to consider it, but right now I probably haven't even considered. Like, do you think about certain groups of folks that you go, I bet you they're not even thinking about it, but if they had, let's get them in.
I think there are definitely like patterns. I would say like folks who are athletes before, even in high school, like you've gone through a bunch of pain repeatedly. You're probably going to be pretty good at you know, operating a small business, you probably have some amount of leadership, and if not leadership, at least teammate skills.
Yeah.
Armed services for sure. I think that's another one. But I think there are a lot of people out there who may not fit a specific mold. They're not like the corporate refugee or the person leaving MBA or the person leaving the service or whatever it may be. I think like generally speaking, it's someone who's like more of an endurance athlete than a sprinter, who's in it either for the freedom or the long-term wealth, but has some mechanism of like delayed payoff.
Yeah.
And then I think it's someone who's somewhat curious as well. I'm like always kind of curious about how things work, how I can be better. It's kind of relentlessly self-improving. I think if you have those three things, everything else, takes care of itself. And we can help with a bunch of it too.
Yeah, no, we can, man. It's you kind of there's a mindset. You might like if you find yourself kind of being slightly the awkward person at the group convo because you just kind of think about things differently than everybody else. Yeah, we probably want to talk to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Will, man, so good to have you on, man. I know we will have many more of these in addition to all these great guests that we're going to have and just things. I think for folks to stay tuned. There's some really good characters in this company. And just being able to riff on it, man.
No, it'll only get better in this episode. So if you listen all the way here.
Will thinks we set the bar low. I think we set the bar fairly high, man.
No.
We only have good stuff. Well, man, I appreciate the time.
We're lucky to have you here too, JC. We're pumped.
I'm stoked to be here, man. It's not even a job. I don't even know what to call it. It's definitely a calling. And I think beyond a calling, I just like, I'll put this out there. If you're in Austin, Texas, look for the flags. Come see us. There's an energy in this place.
Friday,
man.
We have bourbon for you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we have it delivered by whoever delivers it.
Uber Eats.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, now you know, man.
Now you know.
Will, thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you. Anytime.
Thanks for tuning in to the American Operator Podcast, where we celebrate the backbone of America, small business owners and operators like you. If you've enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss out on more of these stories and insights from people who keep our community strong. Until next time, keep building, keep operating, and keep America moving forward.